I'll remind you of this week's challenge in just a moment, but I have for you a second guest to share a little chinwag with. Her name is Samantha Mattox. She's a photographer. She's a writer. She's a chef and a servant to cats. That will make sense in a moment, I promise. The mind behind Mister Mishkins Apothecary, the first in a series of books set around Mister Mishkins, a cat, if you hadn't already guessed. Samantha and I met over video call last week to talk all things writing, cooking, cats. And of course, I can't start a chat without a guest like any normal person. No. So if Mishkins runs an apothecary, my first question for Samantha had to be, what kind of shop would Samantha Mattox run?
Oh, it'd probably be a little cafe or restaurant. That's quite an easy one because I was on MasterChef as well. So yeah, I would just have somewhere where people can just come, sit down, read books, probably stroke some cats as well, eat cake, drink copious amounts of tea and cocktails, and just relax together. And it would just probably be because of the time of year it is now and everything else, it'd be pay what you can afford and just escape from the world and enjoy it just for half an hour or so. It'd be perfect.
Who inspired the love of words and stories for you? Was it something from childhood or more recent?
I've always been a reader and I've always been a writer. I was creating short stories and poems and things before I could hold a pen and write. My headmistress at my primary school, which was Notre Dame Prep School in Norwich, Mrs. Mancini, she really encouraged my writing. So I wrote my first play when I was about 7 years old, and it was about Dr. Bernardo's and Dr. Bernardo meeting Jim Jarvis, and we had to go home, write the opening scene because they were going to do a school assembly, and I went home and wrote the whole thing. So we performed my play when I was 7 with me in the lead role, which was looking back, was quite surreal, but Mrs. Mancini really supported me. And then in high school, Mrs. Goodby from Norwich High School, she was my English teacher, and she instilled in me, and she made me understand words in a different way, like Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte. It's written in Yorkshire. It's written in the dialect, and it's very difficult for people to get into. And she said, if you can't get into it, start in chapter 4, start somewhere else in the book, just go in a different angle and try it. And that is still my favourite book to this day.
Do you feel that sometimes perhaps writing for you in the traditional, fictional story sense perhaps doesn't quite scratch that creative itch, and that's why you've kind of dabbled in other areas or not?
Yes, I don't know. Sometimes, the written word is not always enough. I think you're right to say that, Rob. Sometimes you do need a picture or something to go with it. Sometimes you need something a little bit more. But then I can take a photo and I can write a story about that. I've just done a haiku. I've been challenged to write a haiku, the little Japanese poem.
Yeah, so I love a haiku.
I did that about Mister Mishkins, as I call him. And it's always just about challenging yourself in different ways, and sometimes you do need that whole broader spectrum. I do have a friend, he's a filmmaker, and he's just read one of my short stories, and he's like, we need to make this into an animation because it's brilliant. I'm like, really? So yes, we can take one thing and just go completely versatile with it for something else.
Where did you start? What is the process for you in starting a new idea? Once that thought pops in there, what happens next?
I'm a firm believer I will often have a thought, and I always describe it, I throw it up in the air and let it settle in the back of my brain and then come out again. And I do think you have to do that. With writing, do not be afraid of abortive starts. You will start something and you'll go away and you'll read it and you'll come home and go, seriously? Okay. And you'll start again. Don't be afraid don't ever delete things, but just if you read it and it doesn't resonate with you and it's not what you want it to be, cut it out, put it into a separate document, call it extracts or whatever, save it, and then it's not there. And there's so much information out there as well, and tools and courses and things that can help people. I've been particularly inspired by one woman and her courses, and I did a winter writing sanctuary online virtually with her last year, and off the back of one little phrase I wrote, I've just won the Olga Sinclair Member Shield for the Norwich Writers Circle.
I didn't know that. Congratulations on that. That's incredible.
Thank you.
I love that. I want to quickly pick your brain about the people you kind of turn to test new material against. You need people who are going to be objectively critical, maybe is the word. Who is that person for you, or group of people?
To be honest, it is actually my close family and my close friends, because they are very constructive. and I'll write something I think is really good, and my dad will say, yeah, I think you could try a bit harder on that paragraph. You know, and you're like, it's perfect. He's like, no, you could just, it's not your best. Off you go. You know, so he is, you know, he does do that. The great thing about social media is that we've got all the writers groups on there as well. So I'm a member of Norwich Writers Circle and Suffolk Writers, and Suffolk Writers are fantastic, actually. They're very active. So if you are in Suffolk or just on the periphery, as I am, you can just be a part of that group, and they do daily challenges. You know, it's just a great way to engage, and then you can share things, and you're in a like-minded community. Mr. Mishkins, so he owns a little apothecary, and it sort of appears on a little street called Mosaic Street, and it magically appears in town overnight. So if the town's looking a little bit sad, this little street will suddenly appear. And people find themselves there when they're scared of something. So thunder, lightning. We have a man appear because it's raining, and he's grumpy because it's raining. We have a girl appear and she's sad because there's clouds everywhere and she can't see the sun. And her name is Savita, which means the sun, and she can't see it. So what happens is they all end up in the apothecary. I love the grumpy man because he doesn't even notice there's a cat talking to him. He's like, and then Mr. Mishkins, who just goes down, he puts his cup of cream down. He's always got a cup of cream on the go. He goes down the apothecary drawers and he opens up one of the relevant drawer, and out pops another cat, and then takes that kind of, they just like blink at the person, and then the person finds themselves on top of a mountain or in a waterfall, or in one case actually on like a little on a cloud going off, and then the cloud adventure with Savita, they actually end up going off into outer space. And Mr. Mishkins has to call on the magical M cats, which are my pre-cats to Mishkins, so Merlin, Minsky and Minsky. He has to call on them, and then they all have to go off, they bounce on rainbows around the world.
I love the way your brain works, Samantha. I'm hearing all these words come out and going, this is fantastic. I'm there, I'm on a mountain, I'm on a cloud, I'm under a waterfall. What I love about this is because it's a children's book, it's that inspiration. There'll be so many young people who will read this, and it will be the book that gets them into reading, and maybe down the line writing as well, yes. which is why we want Upload to be here and to exist too. So I'm really grateful for you to share it with us. It's available in all your sort of local bookshops. If you ask in store, I'm sure you can go to your local and say, can you get me a copy of Magical Mister Mishkins, please?
So Magical Mister Mishkins is a series. Mister Mishkins Apothecary is book 1. Yes, it's a Waterstones little brown dog. MrMishkins.com. He's got his own website.
Of course he has.
And yeah, there's limited edition hardbacks as well, which he signs.
Of course he does. I mean, why would he not? Why would he not sign the limited edition hardback copies? I see you in the background there, Mishkins. So Mister Mishkins Apothecary, book 1. Book 2 coming?
Book 2 is coming. It's being written as we speak. I've just done a magazine deadline, so the Magical Mister Mishkins is book 2. And Mr. Mishkins in book 2 meets quite a different character, and that character, my plan is that character will then have its own spin-off series.
And as soon as we're allowed to talk about that, we will have Samantha back here on BBC Upload. Don't you worry about that. A chat with author Samantha Mattox last week. The magical Mister Mishkins series has begun with Mister Mishkins Apothecary, the first book out now, signed by Mishkins himself, no less. I mean, come on! Head to SamanthaMattox.com or even MrMishkins.com for more details and to get your copy of that as well. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Mr. Mishkins.